Gentlemen, Mr. Mark-Anthony Turnage and Peter Erskine, very nice to have you here. You go way back to the 90s, your collaboration. How did you come up with working together?
We actually worked for the first time with a group, jazz group called Creative Jazz Orchestra, run by the composer and conductor Mike Gibbs. He wanted to do a few jazz arrangements actually of a couple of my pieces, and Peter happened to be the drummer that was working as sort of guest drummer, so that's how we got to work. But I think you'd been either booked or asked to do this piece Blood on the Floor, which I did with Peter and John Schofield, so I think there was already we were going to work together, but it just happened just before that we worked on this other project.
The folks that put together this tour of England with the Creative Jazz Orchestra, they were like, you guys should talk, you guys should meet, and you should talk. Yeah. And I remember it was a hotel lobby in Birmingham, I think.
That was in Manchester.
Was it Manchester?
Yeah.
Yeah, Manchester. Right. The hotel has all the sausages for breakfast. 19 different sausages. It's hilarious, because we had our first meeting over all these sausages.
Which I wasn't eating, because I don't eat sausages, by the way.
No.
That's irrelevant.
For Blood on the Floor, and then for the concerto, that was created, or we gave birth to it over a lunch of pizza in Oslo. And they had these large paper placemats, and I remember we turned them over, so it was like a blank page, and we were just scribbling out all sorts of ideas for the concerto. The process that took place before I actually played Blood on the Floor, you know, Mark had written out sort of his fantasy of what the drums might play, and it was spread out, I think, like amongst a couple of players. Yeah. And when the notion of a drum kit actually playing this part came along, then Mark was gracious enough to look at some samples of a more typical kind of drum set writing, because in jazz it's a little more of an outline. Yeah. It's kind of a sketch, and he you know, took to it right away and got the idea. So it gave me a chance to be me.
So could you say this is really a tailor-made concerto for Peter, because the name is Erskin?
Yeah. Oh, it's definitely a personal. It's funny, talking about when we first collaborated, in a way, what happened is that coming from a very classical background, although I've always loved jazz, I've never really worked with any jazz players, so I had this sort of obsession with what the score looks like, you know, in the sense that, you know, I wanted every detail to be right, and it took me quite a while to let go of that, and Peter obviously encouraged me, and then when we did that first meeting, it was like I overwrote everything was overwritten. So basically, over the process of working together, and remember, Blood on the Floor was in '96, so this is quite a few years ago. By the time, various times we worked together, not only on Blood on the Floor when we've worked and sort of developed it over the years, but also we did a double concerto together, you know, with Evelyn Glennie. She did, so it was a concerto from years ago, and then we did this piece with John Schofield called Scorched. So Peter's collaborated with me a lot, and so in the end you get a sort of shorthand, and also a trust builds up. So it's been quite amazing. So by the time we got to the concerto, doing this piece, not only did it become personal in the sense that obviously I know Peter's family, you know, like, you know, as a friend. So different movements, you know, the first movement was named after his kids, the second is after Mutzi's wife, and you know, so it's very, very personal. But also I don't have to write so much for him, because I know that he knows what I want, really. And and if you look at the part, in some ways it's very free. There are certain little bits that I indicated, but I know he's playing so well. And actually I knew it even before we worked together, because I knew a lot of jazz things he'd worked on, and also Weather Report and stuff. So in a way, it becomes quite instinctive, and so it's a lot to do with trust, I think. And I know that he, you know, and also it's the great thing about a jazz player, And these jazz pieces is that they change all the time. They're never the same. You know, each night they're different. So for a composer, especially sitting in the audience, it's very exciting for me because it's always an adventure. Whereas, you know, when you get an orchestral piece, it's, you know, okay, it varies from different orchestra depending on how good they are, but it's usually the same piece over and over again. But in this case, it's not, which is great. So
Shelley Mann once said that jazz musicians, we never play anything the same way once. He's being modest about his drum set writing. I mean, I like a lot of the things you wrote for me to play in the concerto, so I'm kind of, you know, I'm adhering to a bit of it. But there's always you know, what we call elbow room, room to improvise, and it's fun. So it is different. I mean, even during the course of rehearsals, every time we'd play it, doing things differently. And I also want the orchestra to get used to things being different from the drums.
What is it like to play under a conductor? I mean, you are the beat, but the conductor gives you the beat.
he has to be diplomatic now.
we're laughing just because when I worked in Los Angeles recently, the conductor for the West Side Story, he at one point he pointed to me in front of the whole orchestra and he said, "You are the boss. You are the boss." So that, you know, that's my new nickname, the Los Angeles Philharmonic, the boss. True, once the motor or the momentum gets going, you can't really downshift the speed of the thing too much. So I just have to be careful not to get too excited. But a good conductor, and John is an excellent conductor, is essential in holding everything together and reminding everyone about the nuance and shadings. And I'm trying not to take my eyes off of him too much, you know.
I think this is a lot to do with the ego of the conductor, and also whether the conductor again trusts, you know, the drummer or Peter. And I think that's essential because you know and the really good ones do, and they go with it and they know.
The role of the drummer is to play in such a way that you know, hopefully it makes the other musicians feel better, play better. And that's what's interesting about this concerto, is because I have to kind of function in both ways, as a soloist as well as this catalyst, kind of, you know, providing not only rhythmic or textural counterpoint, but just making the thing kind of bubble along, that it has a danceable kind of a quality. So that's kind of the fun.
So you are both the soloist and the background at the same time.
Kind of, yeah. That's and you know, in a lot of ensembles, I mean, the drummer is kind of the master puppeteer. We're responsible for pulling a lot of strings, whether people realize it or not. And you know, Mark gets that, and so I get to do that. But what's cool about this concerto is that it's not your typical, you know, jazz meets classical kind of thing. There's no rhythm section per se, and that, I think that was the first thing we discussed in Oslo, was that we didn't want it to be that, and we didn't want to have a rhythm section. It's the drum set is the concerto solo instrument.
Right? Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, because I can't think of anything more boring than all of a sudden like
yeah. So there is a bass guitar, but it's not part of the rhythm section. It's part of, in a way, it's enhancing the orchestral basses. So that's part of the orchestra rather than any sort of trio or something. Yeah, it's very different in that way.
How would you compare Helsinki Philharmonic with the Bonn Orchestra or the Los Angeles Philharmonic?
I've worked with Helsinki quite before, especially on my trumpet concerto, and I know that. So I know them a little bit from not only working but some recordings, but also being in this new hall, which does make a huge difference. I think the clarity. You know, it was a bit different in LA because it was in the Hollywood Bowl and it was outside. I mean, in the sense that it's always a tricky problem when you know, to some extent. So you have to sort of adapt the piece to some extent. to the hall. But because this is a really clear and brand new hall, the acoustic's very good. I think, yeah. But I mean, the good thing is that I think there are differences between the orchestras. There's a real scary thing these days that a lot of orchestras in the world are homogenous. They all sound the same, and I don't agree with that in the sense that there is a difference between Helsinki Phil, Bonn, and LA Phil. But if they were all very similar, it would be boring for me to travel to hear those pieces, to be honest. So there's different things. But I think that it's interesting that obviously in LA, because it's being an American, the jazz thing is probably second nature. But it seems to me that the Helsinki get it as well, which means that the jazz has become very much part of the sort of like everybody's life here. You know, this fact that Peter's doing a jazz drumming seminar in the Sibelius Academy says it all, really. So I think it's different. It is different, and you'll hear differences. But for me, I like the fact that it's different. It's a positive thing for me. So yeah, it's just the only thing is in some cases you're just getting over your jet lag when you're here in a rehearsal, which is a problem. It's only 2 hours here. Yeah.
The short answer is the Helsinki Orchestra is great, and John is a great conductor, and the hall is wonderful sounding. So, taping this as we are doing before the concert, from where I'm sitting and what I can hear, I'm really enjoying the sound, and we've run through the piece twice, and it's already at performance level. So it's a great orchestra.
Thank you, gentlemen, for this interview.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Pleasure.